Welcome to Connect, Curate, Create, where we're on a journey through the arts and creative industries. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Butcher. If you're anything like me, you love learning about art and creativity. In each episode, I ask artists and creatives how they navigate life, work, and more besides. They generously share their stories and offer invaluable insights that you and I can put into action. As the author of Creative Work Beyond Precarity, I blend my mission to give artists a fair go with my academic smarts to ask the questions that draw out lessons we can all learn from.
It's another thing that I've had to really restructure and think about is not being too rigid in my thinking about where I want to go and end up. And because I feel like a lot of stuff doesn't make logical sense. And, you know, it is about following the breadcrumbs. And a lot of my experience has been, you know, you take the actionable step, you do one thing, and then that opens the door to another little thing. And then you just sort of keep following it. And it's funny sort of what then comes into line and lines up. And I guess the risk in that was, okay, well, perhaps it won't look professional. It's not fitting into a certain box of how it's, you know, supposed to be. But I thought, you know, you've just got to stay true to yourself and, you know, your creative self and put it out there. And sometimes that might not work. And in this case, it did. But I think it's always important to remain true to yourself. And my experience with the majority of artists that I've interacted with or met over these past few years have just all been really lovely and positive. I think there's just so much support. People are really kind and always willing to help. And that's really beautiful. And I think there is a big sense of community and, you know, we are all in this together and we don't have to be isolated or competing against one another. You know, we can share it all.
In this episode, I talk with Daniela Gjocaj, a multidisciplinary artist and colour specialist based in Hobart, Tasmania. Daniela shares with us her transformational creative journey and how trusting in the process and remaining true to herself have opened up surprising yet fulfilling opportunities. Daniela shares wholeheartedly reflections on how her life and practice have transformed since becoming a mother, how understanding our relationships with light and colour can show us something about ourselves, and how we all might explore our creativity to find meaning and intentionality in our everyday lives. Be sure to also check out the show notes for highlights and links that you can use to shape your own journey. If you learned something from this episode, follow us on your favourite podcast app and tell your friends about Connect, Curate, Create. Welcome back to the podcast. I am here again in Hobart and again with another beautiful view and again welcomed into an artist studio. And the artist today is Daniela Gjocaj, multidisciplinary artist and colour specialist. Daniela, apologies. Daniela, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It's exciting.
Yeah, look, we just met today, but I was really struck by the TEDx talk you did last year. Mm-hmm. Now, I went to TEDx in Hobart this year, but I didn't go in 2023. And somehow the algorithm put your podcast put your TEDx talk right under my nose the other week. And I was captivated. You were talking all about colour.
Yes.
So as a colour specialist,
mm-hmm.
that's going to be one thing that I really want to talk about. And then also what your multidisciplinary arts practice is. So perhaps we could start with that TED talk and tell us about what you spoke about and maybe how you got the opportunity to do that and why that was why that came about.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting actually. I saw the TED TEDx come up on my Instagram, funnily enough. It popped up and they were looking for people to come, and the theme for that year was curiosity and like what ignites your curiosity. And I just finished studying my colour therapy course at the time, and I thought, this is something that I should share. Like, there was so much that from learning about colour that just ignited my curiosity, essentially. And to apply was terrifying. I am in no way a public speaker. I don't enjoy speaking in front of crowds of people. But I thought, this is something that I have to do. It's a growth thing for me. The fact that it terrified me, I was like, I've got to do it. I've got to at least try. So I filled out my application, and funnily enough, I thought, I'm going to get it, aren't I? Like, this is how it works. I don't really want to do it. And I did, and I got it. And it was such a fantastic process to go through, like amazing people, all very varied across all different fields that were a part of it. The training that went into it, so learning how to speak in front of audiences, to put together a talk essentially. And from that experience, it was, so many learnings, so much growth. And I, to this day, am just so grateful that I had the opportunity to speak. And my talk was on the power of colour and light, and going into just a little bit of the science behind colour, how we perceive colour, what colour actually is, and how we can use it in our everyday life with a bit more intention, whether it's through artworks or through your art practice or just everyday life.
Yeah. Well, welcoming me into your home here, and I mean, we are in a light-filled room that overlooks the bay. I think we must be I'm east-facing right now, I think. Mm-hmm. And so getting the light, and then how you fill this space with colour as well. It's intentionality in that. Is there intentionality in how colour features in your everyday life?
Yeah. So before I learnt about colour, I was always drawn to colour. Mm-hmm. So the way that I dressed, things that I'd have around me, even in my art practices and painting, I always used a lot of colour. And then to learn about colour and realising, like, well, what could this mean? Like, why am I attracted to these certain colours at certain times? What are the meanings behind these colours, or the qualities that are associated with each colour? And could that tell me a little bit about myself as to, what colour I'm using at the time?
Right.
Yeah.
What's your favourite colour?
At the moment, purple.
Right.
It changes.
Yeah. There's a YouTuber I really love, Van Neistat, and he's worked with Tom Sachs extensively, the artist Tom Sachs, and their colour is very important in the Tom Sachs studio, but they actually talk about how there is no place for purple in their studio. But it features a lot in my life. It sort of keeps coming back into the branding for the connect, curate, create. It's sort of just, there's something about it, and I don't understand it. So how does your practice as a colour specialist sort of help us someone like me to begin to appreciate why I'm, I don't know, wearing a red stripy jumper right now?
Well, I think understanding first and foremost, like, what colour actually is. So colour is just our eyes' perception of light, essentially. So there is no such thing as colour around us. And then understanding what each colour, like the qualities of each colour and what they have, then you can then start to understand, well, what does this actually mean? So this morning you woke up and you're like, okay, I'm going to put on this jumper, and it's red, for example, or I'm going to create my brand for, the connect, curate, create, but this is the colour that I'd really love to use. I'm really drawn to the blues or the purples, whatever it might be. And a lot of the time we are choosing colours on a very subconscious level. And so I guess what really drew me to wanting to learn more about colour was like, well, what could this actually tell us? If we become aware of what colour actually is, what it means, then we can start being a bit more intentional with how we choose colour, how we wear colour, how we paint with colour, how we apply it in our everyday life. Mm. And we sort of see this on a large scale in marketing in society. So we see, for example, fast food restaurants, they're red. We'll see Twitter and Facebook, their logos are blue. So you can start to see on that level like how it's used within society to essentially affect our behaviour and mood.
Yeah, and those marketing agencies, they are very, very intentional. They understand colour.
Exactly.
They understand how different colours are going to affect us. Mm. Now, something that's interesting here, being here in Hobart, where the light is just incredible, and how that would then affect our sense of colour. And the seasonality, it's the middle of winter, but it's about 15 degrees out there. And the wind's a bit fresh, but so it creates a certain climate. And, and there's this, we're high up on the hill, we can see across the bay. And so the blues are really coming through for me. And so so I assume that, our colour choices in a place like Hobart at this time of year would be impacted by that seasonality.
Yeah, it could be too. Yeah, definitely, right. With the colours that are around us, especially in nature. And I'm a big advocate for people getting into nature and being in the greens, because it's very, calming and grounding and wonderful colour to be around rather than just trapped indoors.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you studied colour, and that informs your professional practice in that regard. Let's talk about art.
Yeah.
So perhaps the way into that is does colour feature in your artwork?
It does. Wouldn't it be funny if I said no, don't use colour. I'm black and white. Colour does feature, and it has featured in my artwork my whole life, even before I studied art therapy colour therapy. But it was only until recently that then I decided to go back and study again and understand and learn colour on a more deeper level. So currently with the pieces that I'm creating, I am very intentional about the colours that I choose, and they help to convey a message. Funnily enough, the pieces that are the most popular are blue and greens, which has been quite an interesting experiment within itself, really, creating these art pieces and seeing, okay, well, what colours actually sell better than others, or what colours do people resonate more with? And it's funny just seeing people's reactions to each colour. And my first solo art exhibition, which was a couple of years ago, I did the 6 primary colours, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And so that was what opened the doorway for me to wanting to sort of study and learn colour more, because just seeing how people responded to each colour, and it was just so fascinating to me, like just the associations that people had, the reactions that they had. And I thought, gosh, there is something really here to explore a little bit. And so now the works that I create, they'll have a story and a meaning behind it, and colour is one way that I help to sort of portray that. Yeah.
So your deeper understanding of colour is a recent addition to your practice.
Yes.
Take us back to the beginning. Oh. So have you always been an artist?
I'd say yes. I've always been a creative soul. I think we all are, to be honest with you. It just takes different forms for different people. My early sort of childhood and early life, I danced, and I guess that was a creative outlet for me growing up. I didn't grow up in a creative home, so I wasn't really exposed to sort of painting and that, art and that kind of world. But I was always really intrigued, really curious. And in my 20s, I guess that's what led me to wanting to work in fashion and retail. I loved sort of working with clothing, working with colour in that aspect. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I thought, oh, you know what, I think I might just go to art school. And I was living up in Queensland at the time, and I had a really great job. I loved it. It was a good paying job. And I thought, okay, let's go to art school with no guaranteed outcome. Throw away my little career that I've got going on here and just do it. And I think that sort of set the tone for these past sort of 10 years, I guess, essentially, was taking that risk and taking that sort of step and being like, okay, this doesn't really make logical sense, but I'm going to do it because it feels like the right step for me. And it was. And so I went to art school up in Queensland. It was such an amazing experience, met some incredible people, had a lot of fun. And from there, I didn't launch into any sort of artistic career. I sort of still kept working and doing it more as a hobby. But I guess my practice back then was also a little bit chaotic. It was a bit more of a representation of my life at the time, which was very heavily influenced, like with a lot of drugs and alcohol and things like that. And so my art practice was sort of an extension of that. Quite messy at times. I used to paint a lot with my hands. Like it was a fabulous way to sort of express myself, but I was very much caught up in the tortured artist.
Yes.
Into that scene. I'm just going to drink a bottle of wine and create this thing, and that's not sustainable.
No.
You do get to a point where you just think, yeah, this isn't working anymore. And so the turning point for me was actually falling pregnant and moving back to Hobart. And so within that time frame, I was a new mum, I was newly sober, and I thought, I've got to start creating again. Like, I need to start creating. But the old way of creating no longer fit where I was anymore. I found it harder to paint because I had a newborn baby, so I couldn't sort of access paints and paint in that way because I'd be doing it while she was having a little nap. And so I'm like, what can I do? Like, nothing sort of fits where I'm at the moment. And it was only through watching a Roy Lichtenstein documentary and seeing that he was creating these pieces using the little dot pieces, the little tiny, yellow, blue, red, to make his comic book strip art pieces. And I thought, that's kind of cool. There's something within that I wouldn't mind exploring with the dot. And so I toddled along to the art shop and found Posca pens, which make beautiful, perfect little dots. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to have a bit of a play with these because this is a medium that I can use. I can pop my little one down for a nap. I can go into my studio and I can do some dots. I can experiment with this. It's not messy. I can pick it up and put it down. And so that's where it sort of started.
Ah.
And so, yeah, I started playing around with this idea of using dots. Initially it was in sort of abstract landscapes, playing around with different colours. And then one day I did just sort of a giant circular piece with all the little tiny dots inside. And I remember a friend of mine saying to me, there's something in that, like there's an energy to this. And I remember thinking, I don't know, he's bananas. Like, I don't know what he's talking about. Energy in this piece, I don't know. It's pretty, it's colourful. But from there I thought, actually, you know what? I think I might explore this idea of working with different colours but then creating these beautiful little, dots essentially of all different sort of shapes and sizes and seeing where this sort of takes me. And so a large part of my creative journey has been just following these little sort of steps along the way and just being open, I guess, to well, okay, what's next? Okay, we'll try this dot. Okay, we'll try this. We'll try this with the colour, and just sort of seeing where it takes you.
The power of the dot.
The power of the dot. It's so, like, it's so significant for me, and I feel like sometimes my artwork can be a few steps ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll create something or do something, and then I catch up to it, and I go, oh, okay. And, you know, I was using these dots and I was creating these pieces, and it wasn't until sort of like a couple of years later, then studying colour therapy, which, you know, talks about, you know, light, vibrations, energy, atoms, like we're all made up of energy, essentially. That's all it is. And so it was funny how everything was relevant. It didn't seem relevant along the way, and spent a lot of time thinking, how's this actually going to fit together? And then I guess that's where hindsight's such a beautiful thing, because you get to a point and you're like, okay. To me, it seems like nothing's an accident. You follow these little parts, and then you get to a point you're like, it's all building. It's all building towards something.
Yeah.
And so that's been my experience of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that idea that your artwork is a few steps ahead, and it's almost showing you where to go next.
Yeah.
Perhaps. That's awesome.
It is. It's beautiful, and I really enjoy creating pieces. Like, it's quite funny because the colours that I'm naturally gravitated to when I'm working on my larger pieces, it's quite funny because they tend to mirror what I'm needing or going through at that time in my life.
Yeah.
And so I guess an example for that was when I was using blue, like this beautiful cobalt blue, which, you know, is all about using your voice. It's about your purpose and trust. And it sort of mirrored what I was going through in my life at that time, and how I was using my voice and trying to connect with my purpose and trusting that process. And so that's where it's kind of beautiful to be having sort of that flow with colour and art and your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yes. Yeah. I as a black and white street photographer, and yet I like if I am captivated by incredibly vividly colourful pieces of artwork as well. It's sort of like, so a common connection, Katie Barron,
Yes.
spoke to Katie about this, about how perhaps we are inspired by or are drawn to artwork that actually we don't make ourselves. So I need to reconcile that. But yeah, so that's the thing, is like everything you're saying is like open, you know, it's inspiring me. So then how do I then bring that into my own practice? Yeah. And I have played around with colour film, and I've made colour photography, but actually it's going to be in videography. So yeah, I appreciate the value of colour in making cinematic imagery. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Anyway, look, that's enough about me. Let's segue. So the common link there with Katie, you said that you were telling me before the interview that so you'd shown work alongside. You were in the same prize.
Art prize.
Yeah. So perhaps before we get to that, so I mean that perhaps takes us to further down in the further along in the conversation. It's so you've had some success with your art work recently. You've been showing a lot of work. So tell us about sort of where, you know, how the world can experience your artwork.
Yeah, so I have had some success lately. I've also had a lot of not success, which I think is equally important to share, which we mentioned before recording as well. Like, I think it's just so important to share the full range of the creative journey, the creative experience, because there was a lot of times where, you know, I don't want to say I'm not successful, because that's like, what is success? And it sort of opens that question of, okay, so if I'm in an art prize, or if I win an art prize, or if I have these things, does that equal success? Or am I successful just for showing up on my own individual art practice, even if no one, sees it perhaps? It's a part of my journey these past few years, and navigating the ups and downs of the art prizes, the awards, all the bits and bobs is, well, what is success? What is it that I want? And also this idea around external validation too. Like, it's an interesting world to be in.
Yeah, and I know here, having sort of spent a lot of time with artists in other parts of the world, the art prize is a phenomenon here in Australia, particularly, that is very, very strong. It is a very prominent way to put your work out into the world.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that competitive aspect, or but it is just a way. It's a way to put your work out there and for people to experience it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not. But so your intention around entering those prizes, what was that?
Initially, when I first started, it was I need to get into these art prizes. It was a very external thing to me. And then it sort of shifted, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to create this work. And if things pop along, I'll enter and I'll put myself out there. But the reason I'm creating this work is for myself, and because it needs to come out of me. And that's the intention behind why I like to do what I do and why I create the way that I create. Funnily enough, the times that I've created for something and it's been quite removed from me, they're the pieces that don't do so well, or the pieces that I haven't sold. It's quite interesting that whether people can pick up on that, or it's quite interesting. But I mean, I love entering these things. It's an amazing way to be able to show your work alongside other incredible artists. Like, I was so honoured to be hung next to Katie's work, and our work, I was just like, it just looks so cool all together. Like, very proud moment. But yeah.
And that was so that was a curation in a particular space of people who'd entered, of work that was entered into that particular prize.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so through that curation, the curator would have seen some sort of resonance between your work and Katie's work, I suppose.
Perhaps, yeah. I think because they both had green in there. The three pieces on that wall had green. I thought, oh, they look so lovely.
Yeah, and some people might see that as a simplification, but it's not.
No.
Because it's the power of the colour, right?
It is. It is the power of colour. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Katie uses colour very intentionally as well. There's a vibrancy to Katie's work.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about Katie. Katie gets too much talk on this podcast. Sorry, Katie.
But it works amazing, though. So,
Yeah, and it leads us to something else we were talking about before, which is the how do artists connect with each other? How do we reach the broader world with our work? But then how do we see ourselves as a community? How does that function? And another artist you mentioned was Tom O'Hearn, and how you had some work that needed to go for exhibit, and Tom did you a favour. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful, like having these connections with other artists around. And yeah, we both were in an art prize up at the Bay of Fires, and sent him a little message, and he's like, yeah, I'll chuck it on the back of the ute with some other Hobart artists that he was taking up. And yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely guy. But yeah, it's nice having that sort of sense of community and
but you didn't really know Tom that well before that moment.
Not really.
And isn't that great?
It is beautiful to be able to reach out. And my experience with the majority of artists that I've interacted with or met over these past few years have just all been really lovely and positive. I think there's just so much support. People are really kind and always willing to help. And that's really beautiful. And I think there is a big sense of community and, you know, we are all in this together and we don't have to be isolated or competing against one another. You know, we can share it all, essentially. And
Yeah, and back to the idea of the prize. You know, it could be seen as a competitive medium, but fundamentally it's not. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
And there's a resourcefulness in that as well. You know, it's like actually here in Tassie, it's not that easy to get to the Bay of Fires.
No, after I was like, oh, that was a interesting one to end. I'm like, how am I going to get my work up there? And of course it was massive as well. I'm like, it's not just a little tiny piece to pop in the post.
Yeah. And it costs, it really costs money.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, for a logistics company to be bothered to go all the way up there. Yeah, no. So that being resourceful, I wonder if that is something about Tassie or I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, just regional artists, you know. So I guess, you know, we draw inspiration from where we are, and that's why we are where we are in regional areas. But then, if our artwork needs to travel somewhere else, finding a way for that to happen. How do you know? And yeah. Oh no! Look, that's a question for another time. I think, Daniela. I'm going off topic again. Community building. You were telling me before how you're loving this sort of sense of community and yourself beginning to build community.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of taken a little while to find my new groove, especially as a new mum, and you know, getting sober and realising that, you know, things have shifted and friendship circles or community perhaps change. And so I've been really fortunate these past couple of years to connect with some other beautiful women, and it's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose me being, you know, I've lived here 4 years and I've been very fortunate to meet all sorts of people. And I use the podcast as a way to meet more.
That's
you know,
handy.
we wouldn't have met if it weren't for the podcast.
Yeah.
But, and I think a lot of people would see, too many people would see art as quite isolating. It's a solitary process. So you said about, you know, beautiful group of women that you're working with, and so what are the sorts of things creatively that you're doing together?
Well, it's mostly just getting together at the moment. Yeah, I've just connected with an amazing online community of women that get together, and more aimed for singer-songwriters, but I've sort of tacked myself in there, even though I'm not a singer or a songwriter. But just looking at art and creativity is not just, you know, like you said, an individual practice, or not necessarily even attached to outcomes or making money or making a product, but coming together as a group and just chatting and creating and just enjoying each other's company, essentially, and sort of bringing it back to, like, we were meant to be in tribes, in community, you know, where you'd sit around and you would sing or you would sew or you'd create. Like, that's what we're meant to be doing.
Yes.
And so I think it's just so important to be able to, you know, create those spaces or have those people that you can do that with. And it doesn't have to be necessarily fancy in a hired place or anything. You can just go to someone's home, which is what I'm currently doing.
Yeah.
And, sitting around and having creative conversations, chatting, creating while you're doing it, drinking cups of tea.
Yeah. And it is. There are so many aspects to that. There's a camaraderie and it's having mutual support. You know, it may be that I presume, you know, like, so, you know, I have this myself. That's when I really need to lean on someone. There's having regular catch-ups with a group of like-minded people is when you can work through things that you're going through.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for me, like understanding and realizing that creativity isn't just I've got 1 hour today and that's my creative time.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it's a way of life, how you show up daily. And it doesn't matter if you're a professional artist or if you're just if you're a mum or a dad or if you're a worker, whoever you are, like we are all creative beings and we all show up in our life and create, and it looks different for everyone. And I think that, and that's what was really amazing, like with colour and understanding colour, was incorporating that into everyday life too. So not only using it in my artwork or, in that sort of manner, but how can I walk through life with more intention, using colour with more intention and more awareness and using it with more creativity in everyday life as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so I like that metaphor of walking. So yeah, how do you take that into those communal gatherings?
With colour?
Well, just, colour, but just this energy, like I'm getting this really strong vibrancy from you, Daniela. The way you light up when you not just talk about colour, but just you're being creative in every way. And that for me, I'd love, I'm enjoying this moment, but I think to be part of a group of people who are all bringing that energy, that must be quite dynamic in the room.
It is quite dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think that there's definitely space to be able to, this is how I guess it's starting now for me, but it would be great to expand that as well.
Yeah.
And be able to have or create spaces for other people to come into as well, of any sort of walk of life, wherever you're at, to be able to be a part of a creative community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not enough of it. Or as we were talking again before, maybe these are hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, I think so. Because I've stumbled across a few people and I'm like, where have you been hiding? And I think that there are a lot of people that are feeling the need for this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, it's where it's amazing with you doing this podcast and having these conversations with people. And from the ones that I've already listened to that you've done, you're like, oh, see, there are people out there that are doing these amazing things and are doing these cool things in the world that I wouldn't be aware of otherwise. And it's, really important, I think.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, and I think a podcast isn't the only answer, but how does the world find out? Yeah, anyone, it's like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to try that. I wonder where I can go to learn that.
Yeah.
So well, look, I have ideas, but I guess you do too. But the other thing I get from what you've told us, Daniela, is that you don't have any destination in mind. You're just going to follow the process, and your arts practice and these gatherings, they will lead you. They will lead you wherever you're meant to go, I suppose. Would that be a way to say it, or am I? Yeah,
it is a way to say it. Yeah, it's another thing that I've had to sort of really sort of restructure and think about is not being too rigid in my thinking about where I want to go and end up, and because I feel like a lot of stuff doesn't make logical sense, and it is about following the breadcrumbs, and a lot of my experience has been, you take the actionable step, you do one thing, and then that opens the door to another little thing, and then you just sort of keep following it, and it's funny sort of what then comes into line and lines up.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting balance because I guess you do need to have some sort of a focus, or you can't just sort of be like tumbleweed flapping about.
But I keep thinking of you mentioned when your daughter was very small, and the discovery of dots and the Posca pens, and this is a way I can be creative within what's going on in my everyday life right now. And I suppose that will shift and change as family life shifts and
course.
changes, as community grows, as all these, so being open to possibility.
Definitely. And I think you have to remain open. And even now, it's quite funny, I'm thinking, okay, this sort of structured circle, which I've been doing now for a couple of years, I'm like, I think I'm like ready to try to branch out a little bit and try something different now, which can be daunting because once you've sort of started getting a little bit of success, or you're getting a body of work together that looks a particular way perhaps, it can be a bit scary to go, I think I just want to pivot now and try something else. But I think you have to continually be open to changing and exploring and keep going. And I think focusing, like continually putting the focus inward, in the sense of not trying to conform to what you think other people might want. Whether it's, I need to keep creating this because that's what people want to buy, or that's what's getting into these exhibitions, whatever it might be. I think you have to just stay true to yourself. And I think that can be the most amazing thing, but most scariest thing too sometimes, is to follow that little part within. And so, right now where I'm at, it's quite interesting because I don't know what's next. And I think that can be a really incredible place to be, in the I don't know, and just taking little steps and seeing what sort of comes along. And a friend of mine used the analogy. She said, it's like I've got a puzzle and I've got all these pieces and I don't know how they fit together, and someone's moved the box. And I was like, that's how I feel most days. And so it's about sort of having these sort of parts of like, okay, this is one thing and this is the other. And sort of there is a lot of trust, I think, involved sometimes in the creative process and being an artist. You sort of a lot of the time blindly trusting and blindly following.
The process.
The process, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of magic, and I'm yet to I've never taken a risk, or I've never done something and then it's epically failed. Or if it hasn't perhaps worked out the way I would have liked it, in hindsight, it's always, it's, that bigger picture.
Yeah. And we live in such a deterministic world now, so the world of business and everything around us is about, trying to rationalize everything down so that we can make effective decisions or whatever. But actually, it takes all the fun out of life.
It does a little bit. I think you have to. Speaking of the Bay of Fires Art Prize that I entered, my artist statement this year was a poem. And I thought, this could go either way. But I thought, what felt true to me in that moment was, no, I really want to write like a poem. That's what I want to write that goes with this piece. And I guess the risk in that was, okay, well, perhaps it won't look professional. It's not fitting into a certain box of how it's, supposed to be. But I thought, you've just got to stay true to yourself and, your creative self and put it out there. And sometimes that might not work. And in this case, it did. But I think it's always important to remain true to yourself. Yeah.
You're not averse to risk, are you?
No. It's a positive thing now, though.
Yeah. Well, sure.
There was a time when perhaps my risky behaviour was not such a positive thing. But
well, I mean, look, I've been using the word adventure quite a lot lately in my writing and my thinking about how I move through the world. But I grew up basically being told, don't be adventurous. It's too risky. But so whatever you call it, that I go back to your TEDx. Well, you told us about how you applied, but didn't really want to do it.
Yeah.
And the way you said to us about, oh no, it's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great way to think about it. So it's the same with the poem, really, I suppose.
Yeah, it is.
Just do it.
Exactly.
What does it matter?
And what does it matter? And I had a little chuckle to myself when I sent off my application. It just kind of the absurdity of things sometimes as well, and you do I think the other side of risk, it's like, it's a pretty incredible feeling too. I mean, it was quite risky and adventurous. I remember before walking onto my TED talk, I thought, I'm so glad none of these windows open because I would be out of here. It was like one step away from a panic attack. I'm like, someone's going to have to talk me off the ledge. But afterwards, I think I've never felt such incredible just joy and just, pushing myself to a limit where I was like, I can't do this, but proving to myself that actually I can. And it wasn't perfect. I didn't come out and give this mind-blowing talk that went smoothly. I stumbled and there were little parts that were a bit bumpy. But I did it. And afterwards it was just, I remember just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, like this is a feeling that I'll carry with me. And I feel like the more you do it, it's like working that little muscle, the easier it becomes. And you sort of then, okay, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. I can take this risk. I can go on this adventure or however you call it and know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Look, I always ask people, where are you headed next? But you don't know. And actually, what I'm finding is this is a common tale, and so, but yeah, embracing that uncertainty and exploring opportunity as you do, and feeling comfortable in that. I mean, it's a great way to really sum up, I think, this whole conversation. But what is next?
There's a couple of pieces I'm working on. So that's always still ticking away. So I've got some new creative ideas. But I think there is a lot there for community and women. I feel like there's just a need there for just making creativity a lot more accessible, I suppose. Realising that there aren't creative people and there are not creative people. There are artists and not artists. Realising that, creativity for me, especially over these past few years, has been such a healing tool for me as well. And I think no matter what level or stage you're at, being creative, however that might look, whether you're cooking in a kitchen or, doing, the adult colouring in books, whatever it might be, but it can be so healing and therapeutic. And I do feel like we need to give ourselves permission more to be creative. And especially women my age, like I see a lot of women, 40, their parents, or you've got commitments and not leaving or allowing space to be creative, and getting sort of caught up on if I am creative, there needs to be an outcome. I need to create this piece so then I can sell it or it will be something, rather than just doing it for the joy or the therapeutic way of just expressing ourselves. To me, creativity is like it's a form of expression, bringing out. And so I guess for me, I think I would like to see that manifest more in the world. I don't know how that would look yet, whether sort of trying to build communities or, opening that up, or even just having those conversations a lot more. Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, you're inspiring me, and that but just the possibility that you're exploring there. And so I'm pretty sure that'll inspire many others. And hopefully people will want to get in touch with you and perhaps join your community. Yes. So how can people find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Conscious Colour. And that's where everything is of mine. So I've got my link there for my TED Talk. I've got my artworks that I post up there. I also post... I have been known to post some little videos sharing my creative experiences, the positive and not so positive.
Oh, great stuff. Yeah.
That's currently where you can find me. I am looking at doing all the website side of things. I'm not the most technically savvy person. So maybe that's what's next for me. Maybe I need to get a bit more technically savvy, get these things up and running so people can find me. How do we find you? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I think there's plenty there that we can find you, and I'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it sounds like that's a challenge you're willing to embrace, even if you don't want to. It sounds like the one.
Yeah.
Cool. Look, Daniela, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for inviting me into your home. And this has been invaluable as usual. Look, I just love these moments, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I feel very grateful to have met you and connected this way. It's been lovely.
Well, let's stay connected.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Connect, Curate, Create. I hope you found inspiration and insights that you can apply to your own creative work. For highlights and links, check out the show notes, and be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast player so you never miss an episode. Tune in next time as I continue to explore life and work in the arts.